Hi, I'm Sloane. Today's story is about a woman who spent years making herself invisible, and the one alpha who saw her anyway, in a room full of people trained not to look. It's about scent and restraint, about being noticed after a lifetime of being overlooked, and about how long two careful women can hold a line before it finally, quietly breaks. Stay with me all the way to the end. Are you ready? Then let's begin. The room recalibrated around her, and I was the reason. I felt it before I understood it. A warmth under my skin that had no business being there, a loosening in my chest on an ordinary Tuesday morning in a glass boardroom 41 floors above a gray winter harbor. My name is Linnea Osei. I was 24, an analyst nobody remembered, and my suppressants had not failed me once in 3 years. They didn't fail that morning either. They cracked. Just enough. My scent shifted, faint as a page turning in another room, not nearly enough for anyone at that long table to notice. Except her. Maren Kastel stopped speaking in the middle of a sentence. The director of strategy did not lose her place in a presentation. It simply was not a thing that happened. But her voice stilled, and her gaze lifted from the projections, and it swept the table once and stopped on me. Her nostrils flared, so slightly that I would have missed it if I had not spent 3 years watching her the way you watch weather you're afraid of. She looked at me like I was a variable no one else had clocked. And then, so quietly that only I could hear it across all that glass and steel, she said 2 words. I would spend the next months of my life living inside those 2 words. Before I go on, if this story pulls you in, I keep the longer, more uncensored chapters of stories like this on my Patreon, GL After Hours. It's linked in the description and the comments for whenever you want to stay a little longer inside the story. I want to back up first. I had built my whole life on being forgettable, not incompetent, never that, smooth-edged, quiet, the kind of Omega people nodded at in a corridor and forgot before the elevator doors had closed. Linnea Osei, records and data analyst, good with spreadsheets, reliable, unremarkable. I wore neutral colors. I kept my hair tied back at the nape of my neck. I took my suppressants every morning at 7, at the same counter, from the same drawer, like a prayer I had stopped believing in but could not stop saying. It worked. No lingering looks, no awkward pauses when I entered a room, no attention, which, in a company run by her, was exactly how I had planned to survive. Vance Roe Holdings occupied the top 11 floors of a tower that caught the winter light and threw it back at the harbor like something it resented. I worked on 41, in a bank of desks along the north wall where the sun never quite reached, and I had chosen that seat 3 years ago precisely because the sun never quite reached it. My world was small, and I had made it small on purpose. A chipped enamel mug that had been my grandmother's, pale blue, a hairline crack running down from the rim like a seam of something older than me, a kettle in the corner kitchenette that took 4 full minutes to boil, and that I had learned to love for those 4 minutes because they were the only 4 minutes of my day that asked nothing of me. A window I could see if I leaned back in my chair, and past it a sky I mostly forgot to look at. I liked being unseen. I had reasons, and I want to be honest with you about them, because the whole shape of this depends on it. An Omega who gets noticed in the wrong room at the wrong hour by the wrong alpha learns things about people they would rather not know. I had learned some of those things young, in an earlier job, in a city I don't go back to. So I had folded myself down into a set of neutral colors and a reliable column of numbers. And I had disappeared into the work, and for 3 years it held. I will tell you a little of it, because you have come this far, and you deserve to understand the wall I had built. In the city I don't go back to, at the first firm that ever hired me, there had been a senior alpha who noticed me. Early, the way Maren would later notice me, except that where Maren would spend 3 years saying nothing, this one had said everything, and had made my scent into a currency, and had made my quiet into a thing that could be spent. He never touched me. I want to be clear about that, because the harm that leaves no mark is the harm no one believes. He simply arranged the rooms so that I was always in them, and arranged the hours so that I was always the last one, and made it understood, in the sideways way these things are made understood, that my job and my dignity were 2 doors, and that he held both keys. I left that city with a good reference I had earned, and a conviction I had not chosen, that to be seen as an omega by an alpha with power was to be in danger. So I had folded myself down into neutral colors and a reliable column of numbers, and I had made not being seen into the entire architecture of my safety. That is the wall. I want you to see it clearly, so that you understand what it cost me later to take it down one careful brick at a time for a woman who held every one of the same keys and never once reached for a single door. And then there was Maren Kastel. She was 37, alpha, and she did not command a room so much as she calibrated it. Conversations adjusted around her the way objects adjust around gravity, without anyone deciding to. She was terrifyingly precise. She spoke in short, complete sentences, and she never raised her voice. And the not raising was somehow worse than shouting would have been, because it meant she never needed to. Alphas measured themselves against her and came away smaller. Betas learned to anticipate her. Omegas, mostly, tried not to breathe too loudly when she passed a desk. The myth about Maren Kastel, and every building runs on its myths, was that she noticed no one. She would walk the length of 41, and her eyes would pass over all of us like we were furniture arranged by someone she had never met. The truth, I would learn, was almost the opposite. She noticed everything. She simply never, ever let it show. I had cataloged her the way you catalog the habits of a thing you have decided is dangerous. In my second week, I noticed that the charcoal suits she wore were not charcoal at all. In the right light, near the windows, they turned a very dark green. And I found that unreasonably important, that her clothes had a secret color that most people never saw. She carried a fountain pen she never seemed to actually use and never seemed to put down, turning it once, slowly, between 2 fingers when she was listening. She wore a watch on her left wrist, plain steel, no ornament, and when she was thinking her thumb pressed once against the band, a small private metronome that I came to read like a language. Her voice was surgical and unhurried, and she said people's names the way other people used punctuation. Rarely, and only when it meant something, and never, not once in 3 years, mine. That was the woman. Now the 2 people who saw me. There were exactly 2 people on 41 who saw me, and you need to know them before the rest of this happens. The first was Prisha Nair, Maren's executive assistant, a woman somewhere north of 60 who had worked in that building longer than anyone still drawing a salary in it, and who missed nothing. Prisha had a gift for naming the thing in the room that no one else would say, gently, sideways, and always a half second before you were ready to hear it. She brought me tea I had not asked for on the mornings my hands were unsteady, and she never once asked why they were unsteady. And I have come to understand that not asking was its own quiet form of care. The second was Nell, a 22-year-old junior on the analytics team who had adopted me the way the young sometimes adopt the quiet, without permission, and without noticing she had done it. Nell talked enough for both of us, which suited me, because it meant I never had to. Nell was, though neither of us knew it yet, about to be the reason for everything. Because it was Nell who, 3 days before that Tuesday, perched on the edge of my desk and said, "You look pale. Are you sleeping? You should get a checkup. My cousin's suppressants stopped working and she didn't even notice until..." And then someone called her name from across the floor and she was gone. And the sentence hung there in the air over my desk, unfinished. I told myself it had nothing to do with me. I was very good at telling myself things. It was, in the end, the only real skill I had that Maren Kastel did not already know about. The Tuesday itself. I've gone over it so many times that I can walk through it with my eyes closed. Back-to-back presentations, an overbooked calendar, a pharmacy line the night before that, I had badly underestimated, so that I had gone to bed 1 dose short and told myself, in the dark, that I would manage. My suppressants had never failed me. I had made that fact into a wall, and I had been leaning on the wall for 3 years, and it had never occurred to me that walls are only walls until the morning they are not. The quarterly strategy review was the largest meeting of the season, and I was in it for one reason only: to run the numbers if someone asked, which no one ever did. I took my usual seat at the far end of the table, laptop open, notes ready, my whole body arranged into the careful shape of "not here." Maren stood at the head of the room, already mid-sentence when I sat down, dissecting projections and timelines in that even, cool voice. And I let it move over me the way I let everything about her move over me, carefully, from a distance, filing each detail into a drawer I promised myself I would never open. Then something slipped. It was not dramatic. There was no sudden wave, no flush I could have pointed to and named. Just that warmth under my skin that should not have been there, and the loosening in my chest, and then the drop in my stomach as I understood what was happening. My scent had changed. Not blooming, nothing so obvious, nothing anyone 3 feet away could have caught. The suppressants had not failed completely. They had cracked the way old glass cracks, a hairline you can only see when the light hits it at exactly the wrong angle. Like my grandmother's mug. I even thought that. Absurdly. In the middle of my quiet panic. Like the mug. I went still. My pulse roared in my ears. Around me, nothing. Pens moved. Screens glowed. The meeting rolled on as if the floor had not just opened under my chair, and Maren Kastel stopped speaking. It was so abrupt that the silence felt deliberate, engineered, a held breath. Her gaze lifted from the screen, sharp and focused, and it swept the length of the table once and stopped on me. My breath caught in my throat. That look was not irritation, it was not distraction, it was concentration, assessment, the precise expression of a woman who has just detected a signal in the noise that no one else in the room has the ears for. Her nostrils flared, once, almost nothing. I would have missed it. I did not miss it. I never missed anything about her. And still, no one else reacted. No whispers, no shuffling of chairs. The room stayed exactly as it had been. And to this day, that is the part I find hardest to explain. That the single most important thing that had happened to me in 3 years happened in total silence, witnessed by one person in a room of 30. "There you are," she said. She said it so quietly that I felt it more than heard it, the way you feel a heavy door close somewhere on another floor of a large house. And then, without a flicker of change in her expression, she picked her sentence back up exactly where she had abandoned it, and the projections resumed, and the meeting rolled on, and no one in that room ever knew that anything at all had happened. But something had. I knew it the way you know weather is coming. In the joints. Before the sky says a word. What happened next was very small. Maren finished the review 4 minutes early. I want you to understand how strange that was. She did not do this. She thanked the room in her clipped way, and then she said, without so much as glancing in my direction, "Ms. Osei, stay a moment." A lie so ordinary that not a single head turned. People gathered their laptops and filed out. Nell caught my eye on her way to the door. "You okay?" And I gave her the small, smooth nod that meant fine, and she went. And then the boardroom was empty, except for the 2 of us, and 41 floors of gray winter light, and the enormous quiet that had been building under all of it. Maren crossed to the far wall and touched a panel, and the glass that walled the room went slowly, from clear to frosted, a wash of white that traveled top to bottom, so that the analyst drifting past outside became shapes, and then colors, and then nothing at all. I had not known the glass could do that. I was beginning to understand a great deal I did not know about the rooms this woman moved through. "How long?" she said. Not, "How long have your suppressants been failing?" Just, "How long?" She trusted me to fill in the rest of the sentence myself, and I hated how completely that small trust undid me. No one had trusted me with a silence in a very long time. "1 dose, I said. "Last night. The pharmacy line was—" I stopped. Excuses were noise, and she did not deal in noise. I had watched her not deal in it for 3 years. Her thumb pressed the band of her watch. Once. I watched it the way you'd watch a fuse. You have been managing this alone, she said. It was not a question. For a long time. You take them at the same hour every morning. You sit where the light does not reach. You leave the building through the service corridor on the east side because the main lobby has the acquisitions alphas in it at 6. The floor did the thing again. The opening. Why? I said, and my voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. Maren Kastel looked at me for a long moment. When she finally answered, her voice had lost its edge. Not softened exactly, but lowered. The way you lower your voice near something that is sleeping and that you do not want to wake. Because it is my job to see what everyone else misses, she said. Her thumb moved on the watch band again. I have known your name for a long time, Ms. Osei. I did not know what to say to that. So I said the only true thing I had left. You've never said it. No, she agreed, and she let that sit between us in the frosted quiet, and neither of us moved to pick it up. I need to tell you what I did next because it is the whole spine of this. And if I skip past it, you will not understand a single one of the months that followed. I set a condition. I could have let her manage me. It would have been so easy. She was already reaching for the levers. I could see it. Already turning over in that precise mind of hers how to move me somewhere the crack would never cost me anything. And God help me, I wanted it. I wanted to be handled. I wanted to be tucked somewhere safe by the one woman in that building who could actually make me safe. That is the oldest and most dangerous want an Omega carries under her ribs. And I had spent 3 years starving it on purpose. And here it was, awake, in a frosted room, reaching back. Instead, I stood up straight, and I made myself meet her eyes. And I said, if you move me for my work, not for this. I will not be the analyst the director rescued. The room was very quiet. Maren studied me for a long moment. Something changed at the corner of her mouth. Not a smile, nothing so generous as a smile. Just a single millimeter of a thing. The ghost of the idea of one. Understood, she said. And then, after a beat, then you will have to give me a reason. There is a file. A pause. Reconcile it. If your work makes the case, I move you down to the 14th floor records office, where the light is better, and the acquisitions alphas never go. Another pause, and then the thing that mattered most. And either way, whatever you decide, whatever you find, no one will ever learn what happened in this room. And your word is worth everything, she said, without hesitation, without heat. I took the file. I want to say something first, before I tell you what was in it. I took the file believing it was a test of my competence. It was not. The first thread of something that was going to pull the whole building apart, and she knew it, and she handed it to me anyway, because she had decided, in a frosted room, in 4 stolen minutes, that I was the one person she trusted to pull it.
If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe so the next one can find you. Stay close.
The first week passed in the strange, suspended quiet of a person waiting to find out whether her life had actually changed or whether she had imagined the whole thing. Nothing obvious happened. Maren did not look at me in the corridors. She passed my desk with the same furniture blind sweep as always, her fountain pen turning slow between 2 fingers. If I had not carried the frosted memory of that boardroom around in my chest like a stone, I would have been able to convince myself I had invented all of it. But there were small things. There were always, from then on, small things. On the second morning, a fresh box of my suppressants, the correct brand, the correct dose, the exact one I bought from the pharmacy with the long line, was sitting in the top drawer of my desk when I arrived. No note. I never once saw who put it there. I did not need to. On the 4th day, the Northern Acquisition file, which was supposed to exist only as fragments scattered across 6 different archived systems, appeared on my drive whole and clean and ordered, 6 years of it, sorted, cross-referenced, as if someone had spent an entire night pulling it together so that I would not have to. There was no message attached. There was never a message. There was only the work quietly made possible by a hand that refused to be seen doing it. I cataloged each thing because cataloging was the only way I knew how to hold anything. The box of suppressants, the assembled file, the way the kettle in the 14th floor kitchenette, because by the second week she had already, without a word, begun moving my axis downstairs, was somehow always full when I came to it in the mornings, so that I never again had to wait the 4 minutes. Small, deniable, anonymous. A woman who could not say she cared, building plank by careful plank, a world in which she would not have to. Why was she being kind to me? I turned the question over for a full week and got no answer back that did not frighten me a little. By the 11th day, I had a case, and it was far better and far worse than either of us had expected. The northern file had a hole in it, not a small one, a discrepancy of nearly 40 million units, buried across 6 years of acquisitions, dressed up so carefully, layered so patiently, that it had slid clean through 3 separate audits without leaving a mark. And it was not an error. I have spent my whole career with numbers, and numbers have a grammar. And this had been written deliberately by someone who understood the grammar as well as I did. I sat with that at 8 o'clock at night, alone on 14, with the harbor gone black outside the east window. And I understood slowly that I was holding something that could end careers, and that one of the careers it might end belonged to a man 3 floors above me, whose name was on the building. Adrian Roe, as in Vance and Roe. I did not sleep that night. In the morning, I did the only thing I knew how to do with a dangerous truth. I put it in a 2-line note, clean, quiet, complete, and I flagged it, and I did not sign it. The same thing I had done 3 years earlier with the Eastern variants. The same instinct, tell the truth and disappear from it. And an hour later, Prisha Nair appeared at my desk with a cup of tea I had not asked for, and set it down and said, in her mild way, without looking directly at me, "She read your note twice. I have worked for that woman for 11 years. She let that settle over me, then more gently, 'You should understand what you are standing next to, dear.' 'I don't know what I'm standing next to,' I said. Prisha smiled, and it was not unkind, and it was not entirely happy either. 'No,' she said, 'but she does.' And she left me with the tea and the sentence, and both of them went cold before I could make myself touch either one. Here is the part that is hardest to explain, because almost nothing in it looks, from the outside, like anything at all. This is the part where a great deal happens, and none of it can be pointed to. This is the part I have thought about the most. Maren moved me to 14, for the work, and she made a point of it being for the work, sending a memo to the entire division that named the Northern Reconciliation, and named the analyst who had cracked it, so that for the first time in 3 years, the people on those floors learned my name from something other than a seating chart. I hated it. I loved it. Both were true at once. And I lived that whole season in the narrow seam between them. The 14th floor records office had a window that faced east, and in the mornings, the light came all the way across the room to my desk, and I sat in it like a plant that had been kept in a cupboard for too long and had forgotten what it was for. Maren's office was on that floor now, too. She had cited reasons of proximity to the archives, and no one on earth questioned the director's reasons. Her door was often open. I could see her at her desk if I looked. I had trained myself over years not to look. I looked anyway, once an hour, the way you press on a bruise to find out whether it still hurts. The weeks stacked up like that. Let me give them to you the way I lived them. Not as a story, because it did not feel like a story while I was inside it, but as a series of small collisions, each one held, each one survived. On the 4th day on 14, she brought me a file herself instead of sending it. She set it on the corner of my desk, and her hand, doing it, came close enough to mine that I could feel the warmth coming off her skin, and she did not close the distance. And I did not close the distance, and the 2 inches of air between our hands felt more charged than anything I had ever touched. "Good work on the Eastern variants," she said, "not the Northern one. The Eastern one, the one from 3 years ago, the 2-line note I had never signed. She had carried it that whole time, folded up somewhere, and she chose that moment to hand it back to me. And then she straightened and left. I looked at my own hand for a long while after she had gone, at the place where the warmth of hers had almost been. By the second week, I had begun to understand the shape of what she was doing, and it broke something open in me. I came in one morning and my grandmother's mug, the chipped pale blue one, the one with the hairline crack running down from the rim, was sitting at my place, washed, sully, steam coming off it in the east light. I had left it in the 14th floor kitchenette the night before, without thinking, the way you leave a thing when you have stopped believing anyone is watching you closely enough to notice it is yours. I asked Prisha carefully whether she had done it. Prisha looked at me over the top of her glasses and said, "I don't do the mugs, dear," and returned to her screen. And I stood there and understood that Maren Kastel, director of strategy, the woman alphas measured themselves against and lost, the woman who calibrated rooms, had washed a junior analyst's chipped, cracked, secondhand mug and filled it and set it at her place so that she would know it was hers, and had told absolutely no one. And I had to go and stand in the 14th floor stairwell for a minute, with my hand flat against the cold cinder block so that no one would see my face. How long had she known? Not just my name, this, me, the mug, the kettle, the seat where the sun didn't reach, the service corridor at 6. How long had she been seeing all of it and saying nothing and holding the whole careful weight of it alone? 3 weeks in, the acquisitions alphas came down to 14 looking for the analyst who had flagged the northern file. There were 3 of them, and they came in loud, the way men get loud when they have decided the problem is a person and not a number. When they want the number to have a face, they can put their disappointment on. I felt the floor shift under me the way it had shifted in the boardroom. Every instinct I owned told me to fold down, to go neutral, to become furniture. And before I could disappear, Maren was simply there. In the doorway of the records office, between them and me, coat off, one hand resting easy in her pocket, not raising her voice. She never raised her voice, saying only, "The reconciliation is mine." And I watched the 3 of them measure themselves against her in real time and come away smaller, exactly the way I had watched 100 alphas do it over 3 years. Except this time, she had put herself deliberately in the doorway, between the loudest people in the building and the smallest one. And she never once looked back at me while she did it. She did not need to. I understood exactly what she had done. So did they. They left. "You didn't have to do that," I said, when they were gone. "No," she agreed, already turning back toward her office. The corner of her mouth did the millimeter thing, and that was all. By the end of the first month, there was the Winter Gala. Vance Roe held one every year, a leadership dinner in a ballroom 2 blocks from the tower, chandeliers and long tables, and the whole senior floor of the company arranged into its careful hierarchy for one catered evening. Analysts at my level were not invited. I was invited that year, in a line on the division memo, under the Northern Reconciliation. And I understood without being told whose hand had put me on the list. I stood at the edge of it in a borrowed dark dress, holding a glass of champagne I did not drink, doing the thing I had always done at the edges of rooms, becoming furniture. And it almost worked, except that one of the acquisitions alphas, 3 drinks in and loud with it, had decided that the analyst who flagged the northern file was a thing to be handled socially. And he crossed the ballroom toward me with that particular walk, and I felt the floor begin its familiar tilt. And then Maren Kastel was beside me. She had crossed the whole room to get there, unhurried, and under the chandeliers her charcoal suit had gone frankly, openly green, the secret color of it out in the light for anyone to see. And she stood at my shoulder with her champagne untouched and said, to him, 4 words. That was all, not a threat. She did not deal in threats, just a fact, set down on the table between them, and the acquisitions alpha did the arithmetic and turned it into a smile and a retreat, and the room went back to its hum. "You didn't," I started. "Have to," she finished. And she stayed at my shoulder for the rest of the evening, a careful and deniable 8 inches of air away, and we did not touch once, and it was the closest I had ever felt to anyone in my life. Later, on a cold balcony where she had followed me out to escape the noise, she turned her champagne glass slowly in her fingers, the way she turned the fountain pen, and she looked out at the harbor lights and said, without looking at me, "Stay where I can see you. In there." And I filed those words away with the mug and the kettle and the watch, in the drawer I had promised myself I would never open. And that was by then very nearly full. Nell almost found out once. She came to my desk on 14 with a form that needed a second signature, and she saw the box of suppressants in my open top drawer. The correct brand, the correct dose. And she went quiet in a way Nell never went quiet. And she looked at me, and she looked at the closed door of the director's office down the hall, and something moved behind her young face that I could not stop. "Linnea," she said carefully, "the morning of the strategy review, you stayed behind." She was not accusing me. She was 22 and putting a thing together out loud, the way the young do. Is she? "I found a 40 million unit hole in the northern file," I said, which was true, and which was not an answer, and which I had learned from a master how to set down in place of one. "That's why I'm down here." Nell looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded, and she let it go because she was kind, and because some part of her understood that whatever the real answer was, it was mine to keep. But before she left, she said one more thing, quietly, and it stayed with me. "You look different down here," she said, "in the light." And she took her form and went, and I sat there in the east light and did not know whether to laugh or put my head down on the desk. The near miss came in the archive. The northern file lived in its oldest layers, on physical media in a climate-controlled room in the sub-basement, and one evening we were both down there, pulling 6-year-old drives from a shelf too high for me, and she reached over my shoulder for the box I couldn't reach, and for one moment, the whole warm length of her was a breath away from my back, her arm alongside mine, her scent, cedar, and under it the thing the suppressants were meant to hold, everywhere. And I felt my own control go thin as old glass. Neither of us moved. That was the discipline of it. We stood in the cold hum of the archive with the box in her hand and the distance between us down to nothing. And we did not close it. And I understood that she was holding herself exactly as hard as I was holding myself, and that the holding was the whole thing we were building, plank by plank in the dark. "You should take the drives up," she said, finally. And her voice was not quite steady. And it was the first time in 3 years I had ever heard it be not quite steady. And I have kept that too. She set the box in my hands, careful not to let her fingers touch mine. And she stepped back, and the perimeter came back up around both of us like a held breath let halfway out. I took the drives up. My hands were not steady either. Prisha had tea waiting on 14, as if she had known, which of course she had. It was Prisha who finally told me why. I had asked her, carefully, over the tea, on an afternoon when Maren was upstairs in a meeting that had no end, why a woman like that would spend 3 years seeing someone and never once say so. And Prisha put down her cup and looked out the east window, and for once, she did not answer sideways. 11 years ago, when I started, she was not the director, Prisha said. She was young, and she was brilliant, and she wanted something the way you want things at that age, openly. She wanted a colleague, another alpha, senior. And it was known, in the building, the way these things are known, and when the promotions came, they used it against her. Said she couldn't be trusted with the strategy floor because her judgment was compromised. Prisha turned her cup a quarter turn on its saucer. She lost the thing she wanted and very nearly lost the floor as well. And I watched her decide. I was there. I watched her do it. That she would never again let this building see her want anything. She looked at me then, over her glasses, and her eyes were kind and very old. And then, 3 years ago, a quiet Omega in a seat the sun didn't reach found a variance 4 senior men had missed, and flagged it and didn't sign it. And I watched her read a 2-line note twice. Prisha picked her cup back up. "So no, dear, she will not say it. She has trained herself out of saying it at a cost you and I cannot imagine. If you want it said, you are going to have to build the kind of room where it is finally safe for her to say it. and I do not think you can build that room by standing at a careful distance forever. But that is not my decision. It is yours." And she drank her tea and left me with all of it, and it did not go cold this time because I held it too tightly for that. Each of these was very small. I want to be clear about that because it is the whole engine of the thing. Not one of them was a touch. That was the architecture of that entire season, the perimeter she held and the perimeter I held, and the enormous, deliberate, aching distance between two people who both knew, to the inch, exactly how far the other one was standing, and neither of whom would take the step across. "You are going to have to say something eventually," Prisha told me one afternoon, mild as milk, over a cup of tea I had again not asked for. "One of you. The building cannot hold its breath forever. I have watched it try." "There's nothing to say," I said. Prisha did not even dignify that with a response. She simply drank her tea and looked out the east window at the harbor, and let me sit inside my own lie until it got uncomfortable, which was, I was learning, a thing she was extraordinarily good at. There was a morning in the 6th week that I have not told many people about. It was a bad day. The suppressants do what they do, but a body is a body, and there are days when the medicine holds the line and the body leans against it anyway. And you spend the whole day aware of your own skin, of the temperature of every room, of the distance to every door. I had learned over years to get through those days by making myself smaller and quieter than usual, by drinking water and counting the hours and not, under any circumstance, being anywhere near her. That morning, I came in braced for exactly that kind of day, the kind you survive by disappearing. And the day rearranged itself around me. My calendar, when I opened it, had 3 meetings on it that had not been there the night before, and all 3 were solitary. Records to review alone, in the archive, in the cool quiet of the sub-basement, away from the floor, away from people, away from her. The kettle was full. There was a fresh bottle of water at my place that I had not put there, beside my grandmother's mug, and the door to the director's office, which was usually open, was closed all day and stayed closed, and I understood that she had read the morning off me from 30 feet away, the way she had read it off me across a boardroom, and that she had responded not by coming closer, but by building me, quietly, an entire day of distance and cool air and solitude, the most protective thing one alpha can do for one omega, which is to give her, without being asked and without making her ask, exactly the space she needs to keep her own dignity intact. She did not come near me once, all day. That was the gift. The perimeter held so hard I could have wept, and by evening the day had passed, the way bad days pass. And when I finally left through the East Service corridor at 6, there was a single line of text on my phone, from a number I had by then learned by heart. Better? 1 word. I typed yes, and then deleted it and typed thank you, and then deleted that too, because both were too small, and in the end I sent back 1 word of my own. Better. And I watched the 3 dots appear, and then stop, and then not come back. And I understood that she had read it and set the phone down and let herself, somewhere 3 floors up behind a closed door, feel whatever it was she had spent the whole day not letting either of us feel. Why was she being kind to me? I had stopped asking. The question had finally answered itself, and the answer had a shape I was no longer afraid of. On the 4th night, she came back to 14 late, past 9, when she believed the floor was empty. It was not. I was still at my desk with the Northern file, because the discrepancy had grown a second head. A set of transfers routed through a holding account that, according to every legitimate record in the building, did not exist. The more I pulled at it, the more it seemed to pull back. I heard the elevator, and then her step in the corridor. That particular economy of movement she always had, no motion wasted. And then she was standing in the doorway of my office with her coat still on and the black harbor behind her. "You should be home," she said. The corner of her mouth did the millimeter thing. She came in. She crossed to the edge of my desk and looked at the screen over my shoulder, close, and I could smell the cedar of her coat. And underneath it, faint, the thing the suppressants were supposed to keep me safe from. And for 1 full second, neither of us pretended we couldn't. "The holding account," she said quietly, reading. She was quiet. Her thumb pressed the watch band once. And then she said the thing that turned all of it, the thing I have gone over every day since. Just the name. She had never said it. Not in 3 years, not in the frosted boardroom, not in the memo. She said it now, in the dark, over a file that was about to become a fire. And she said it the way she said any name, like it was punctuation, like it was the period at the end of a sentence she had been quietly building for 3 years. Whatever this file is about to become, and it is about to become something, and soon, I need you to understand something first, she said. I did not move you down to 14 to keep you close. I moved you because your work earned it, and because I meant every word of that memo. The room was very quiet. I don't know what to say, I said. It was becoming the most honest sentence I owned. You don't have to say anything, she said. And then she straightened, and I watched the distance come back into her the way a tide comes back into a harbor. Unhurried and total. Go home. We finish the file in the morning. And she left, and I sat in the dark on the 14th floor with my grandmother's cracked mug going cold, and her voice saying my name on a loop in my chest, and I did not go home for a long, long time. The next morning, she was at my door at 7, 2 coffees in her hands, and she set one down beside my grandmother's mug without a word about the fact that she had brought me coffee, and we finished the file, both of us. Side by side, at the same desk, in the east light, not touching, the 2 inches of air between our forearms humming like a wire for 6 hours. By noon, we had the whole of it, the 40 million unit whole, the holding account that did not exist, 6 years of transfers, patient and deliberate, written in a grammar I could now read as clearly as my own handwriting, and a single authorizing signature, buried at the bottom of the oldest layer, that neither of us said out loud, because we did not have to. Maren looked at it for a long moment. Her thumb did not move on the watch band. That was how I knew how serious it was, that she did not reach for the one small thing she reached for when she needed to keep herself steady. She just looked at the name, and then she looked at me. This is going to cost someone everything, she said quietly. I need you to understand that it is not going to be you. Whatever happens in the days after I take this upstairs, it will not be you who pays for it. That's not your decision, I said. It is entirely my decision, she said, and I should have argued. I want you to know that I saw, even then, exactly what she was setting herself up to do. But I said nothing. Because a small, starving, 3 years hungry part of me wanted just once to be someone worth a woman like that spending everything on. That was the miscalculation. I let her think she could carry it alone, because I wanted to be carried, and it very nearly cost us both. For 3 days after we finished the file, nothing happened, and the nothing was worse than anything. I want to say something about waiting, because those 3 days taught it to me. Waiting is not empty. Waiting is a room slowly filling with water. Maren took the file upstairs herself, alone, and told me only, say nothing to anyone, do your ordinary work. And so I sat in the east light and reconciled ordinary records and drank from my grandmother's mug. And every time the elevator opened on 14, my whole body braced. And every time it was only Nell, or a courier, or Prisha with tea. The building went about its business above me, and somewhere in it a fire had been laid, and I was the one who had struck the match. And now I had to sit in the good light and pretend I could not smell the smoke. On the second night, someone tried to touch the file. I caught it because I could not stop looking. A small access log, a login to the oldest archived layer at 11 at night, from a credential that had no business in the northern records at all. Nothing was deleted. The attempt failed. The layers Maren and I had pulled were already mirrored somewhere I could not see. Somewhere she had put them without telling me. But someone, 3 floors up, had reached into the dark for the thing we had found, and had found it already gone, and had understood in that moment that they were too late. I called her. It was the first time I had ever called her, and she answered on the first ring, at 11 at night, as if she had been sitting by the phone waiting for exactly this. I saw it, she said before I could speak. "It's already handled." And she said my name again, the second time in a life of never having said it once. And this time it was not punctuation. This time it was a hand held out in the dark. I did not sleep, but I lay there holding the fact of it. She answered on the first ring, and it was almost as good as sleep, and closer than I had been to rest in years. On the third morning, she left me the pen. I had never once seen her use the fountain pen. In 3 years, it had been a thing she turned between 2 fingers when she listened, a small silver weight that never touched paper. I had decided, privately, that it was a prop, a thing to give her hands to do, so that they would not do anything else. So when I came in on the third morning and found it lying across a folded note at my place on the desk, beside my grandmother's mug, I stood and looked at it for a long time before I could make myself pick it up. The note was 3 lines, in ink, in a hand I had never seen because I had never seen the pen used. It said, "Whatever happens tomorrow, it happens because you told the truth and refused to sign it. And then, when it mattered, you were willing to sign it after all. Keep the pen. I have not needed it in years. I think I was keeping it for someone." There was no name at the bottom. She did not sign it. Of course she didn't. She had learned from watching me exactly what an unsigned note could carry that a signed one couldn't. I kept the pen. I have it still. It is on the windowsill now beside the mug, and I am telling you about it early so that you will understand what it means when I tell you about it again. The crisis, when it came the way she had said it would, fast and from above. Adrienne Rowe called an emergency leadership review. The real reason was that a 2-line, unsigned note had gotten close enough to a holding account to smell it, and the man whose name was on the building had decided, the way frightened, powerful men always decide, that the safest thing to do with a problem was to turn it into a person and then remove the person. Prisha found me in the 14th floor kitchenette an hour before the review, and for the first time in 11 years of tea and mild sideways sentences, she was not mild. "He knows an analyst flagged it," she said, low and fast. "He does not know which one. Maren does. Listen to me, dear, because I am only going to say this once. If she gives him your name in that room, this goes away for her, quietly, cleanly, and it lands on you, and you are gone by Friday, and there is nothing anyone can do about it." She reached out and gripped my wrist once, hard, which she had never done in 3 years. "She is not going to give him your name. That is the problem. She will burn her own position to the ground before she lets you within 100 feet of that room." And I understood, standing there with my grandmother's mug in my hand and Prisha's fingers around my wrist, what the whole slow, aching architecture of the last months had been quietly building toward. Not the touch we had refused to take. This, the single moment where one of us was going to have to decide who paid. And I was not going to let it be her. I asked Prisha to get me 5 minutes on the leadership floor before the review began. She looked at me for a long moment, the longest she had ever looked at me. And then, without another word, she made a call, and a door that had never once opened for me opened. I have thought a great deal about what it cost me to walk through it. For 3 years, I had built an entire life out of the discipline of not being seen. I had chosen the seat the sun didn't reach. I had left through the service corridor at 6. And now I was about to walk into the most seen room in the entire building and make myself the deliberate center of it, on purpose in front of the people most able to end me, to keep one woman from spending everything she had left. Adrienne Rowe sat at the head of the leadership table, gray and composed and dangerous. Maren stood at the far window with her back to the room, coat off, thumb pressed hard against her watch band, pressed and held. Not the single private tap, but a grip, which I had never once seen. When I came through the door, she turned, and I watched her understand in real time exactly what I was about to do. And I watched her open her mouth to stop me. For the first time in the entire story, I got there first. "I flagged the northern file," I said, into the whole quiet room. "It was me. Linnea Osei. And I laid it out. The 40 million unit whole, the holding account that did not officially exist. 6 years of patient, deliberate transfers, the grammar of it. I laid it out clean and quiet and complete, the way I had learned to lay a thing out from 3 years of watching her do it, from 6 hours side by side in the East Light. I did not accuse anyone. I did not need to. I simply set the truth down in the middle of that table where every person in the room could see it. And then I stood there, small and visible and entirely unhidden for the first time in my adult life, and I let the room do the arithmetic itself. The silence that followed was a different kind than the boardroom silence had been. That one had been intimate, one person hearing me in a room of 30 who could not. This one was structural. This one was the sound of a very large building realizing, all at once, that the load had shifted and that it was going to have to be rebuilt around the new weight. Adrian Rowe looked at me the way Maren had looked at me across the boardroom on that Tuesday, like I was a variable he had failed catastrophically to clock. Across the room, before I could answer for myself, Maren Kastel spoke quietly into the structural silence. "That is Linnea Osei," she said. "She is the best analyst in this building. Say her name correctly." She had walked into that room prepared to protect herself with my name. Instead, she protected me with it out loud, on the record, in front of the man who owned the walls and the floor and the light. And I understood in that moment that we had both, at the exact same time and for the first time, stopped holding the line, not by crossing the distance between our hands, by choosing, by each of us stepping, at last, in front of the other. The review did not end my career. It ended other things. A signature, a name at the top of the building, a version of the company that could no longer stand once the truth was set down on the table. I will leave the details of all that to your imagination, because this was never, from the very first frosted minute, a story about a file. She found me afterwards, on the 14th floor, in the records office, in the East Light, gone gold and low at the end of the day. She did not say anything for a long while. Neither did I. The whole enormous careful distance of the last months was in the room with us, and for the first time it had nowhere left to go. No meeting to hide inside, no file to be about. "You should not have done that," she said finally. "Neither should you," I said. Her thumb moved toward the watch band, and then, slowly, deliberately, watching me the whole time, she stopped. And instead, she took the watch off her wrist entirely and set it down on the desk between us, on top of the northern file, and I understood that I was watching her put down the one small private thing she reached for whenever she needed to keep herself in check, and that she was doing it on purpose so that she couldn't. "I have been very careful with you," Maren said. "I moved you for your work. I held the perimeter." A pause. Her voice, when it came back, had lost the very last of its edge. "I don't want to be careful anymore. But I will be. I will hold this line for another 3 years, for 30, if you tell me to. I have the practice for it." The room was very quiet. "Say it again," I said. She knew exactly which words I meant. She had said them once, across a boardroom, in a silence only I could hear. "There you are," Maren said, and then she closed the distance she had held for months, one step, slow, unhurried, giving me every second in the world to move away. And she lifted her hand and rested it, warm and steady, along the line of my jaw, her thumb at my cheekbone, and she did not move it. She let it be the whole thing. She let one careful touch, held, say everything that months of held distance had said. And I turned my face the smallest amount into her palm, which was the entire and only answer I had, and her forehead came down and rested against mine. And we stood there like that, in the gold light with the harbor going dark below us, 2 careful women who had finally, after all of it, let the line break. She kissed me once. It was the quietest thing that has ever happened to me. "I saw you," she said, low, against my mouth. "From the very first month, the whole time. Every day you thought you were invisible, I was the one person in this building who could see you. I'll tell you how it is now, because I know that is what you have stayed all this way to hear, and because after all that restraint, you have earned the ending. It is a little over a year later. We do not work on the same floor anymore. She was very firm about that, in the end, immovable, that whatever we were going to be to each other, it would never be a thing that gave her any power over me. She rebuilt her own role from the ground up to make certain of it. I am the head of records reconciliation now. I found the hole that took the old name off the building. They were never, in the end, going to let me stay small after that, and I have stopped wanting to be. There is a small apartment near the water, where the morning light comes all the way in across the floor the way the east light used to come across my desk. On the windowsill, there is a chipped pale blue mug with a hairline crack running down from the rim, and she washes it now without being asked and fills it and sets it at my place with the steam coming off it, the way she did that first morning on 14 when she was still pretending it wasn't her. She still wears the steel watch. Her thumb still finds the band when she is thinking hard about something. But she does not reach for it near me anymore, not to keep herself in check, not to hold any line. And I have decided that this is the truest thing she has ever told me, without using a single word. The fountain pen is on the windowsill too, beside the mug. I told you I would tell you about it again, and here it is. And here is what it means. She kept that pen for years and never once used it. A thing to give her hands to do so they would not do anything else. A small silver discipline she carried through 8 years of never letting the building see her want a single thing. And then, on the third morning before the review, she left it at my place with a note she wrote in the ink she had been saving. And she said she thought she had been keeping it for someone. She had. She keeps nothing back from me now. Not the pen, not the watch band, not the millimeter at the corner of her mouth that used to be the only thing she'd let me have. I use the pen for everything. I signed the lease on the apartment by the water with it. I have decided that a woman who spent 8 years refusing to want, and then handed me the object she used to hold that refusal in her hand, has said I love you more completely than anyone who ever used the words. She still hasn't used the words, actually. She doesn't need them. She has 2 others, and they do more work than 3 ever could. Some mornings I catch her watching me from across the room. It is the same attention it always was, the mature, unhurried, total attention of a woman who spent years seeing everything and letting none of it show. Except that now she turns it on me, deliberately, and lets it show. And when I look up and catch her at it, she does not look away, the way she used to for 3 years. She just says it. The 2 words that found me across a silent boardroom, in a room full of people trained not to look, on an ordinary Tuesday that turned out to be the least ordinary day of my life. And every single time, without fail, in the morning light, with my grandmother's cracked mug warm between my hands, I am 400 Onela Hezeroluncha SRT Yiat.